All right, all right. Hi, my name is Emma. I am a mom of identical twins who are almost 13 months old. And today I want to share with you something that I hope will help you. I want to sit down with you and have a cup of coffee and just share some of the things that I have learned along the way as it pertains to twins and sleep, how to help you get your twins to sleep, how to develop healthy sleep habits with your twins. So let's sit down, let's have a cup of coffee together, and let me share with you some of the things that I've learned along the way. I'll give you a little hope right now. They're 1 year old, a little older than a year, and since about 8 months they have been sleeping through the night, and there are no more middle of the night wake ups, or if there are, they are very few and far between. And I am going to share with you how we got to that point and also just some of the details along the way. So I have some notes with me because, to be honest, the journey of sleep with twins is ever changing, and what happens one day is not what's going to happen the next day. And so I tried to, section up this video into different stages that were very different from one another, and some things that we did in those stages that worked really well. Maybe things that I look back now and think that maybe that wasn't the best approach. And so I hope I can share some of those things with you. So just a little bit of a backstory on where we started. I made it to 37 weeks. I had a scheduled induction. We made it to that induction, and then the outcome was 2 healthy babies, one of which was able to stay with us, and the other one spent about 6 days in the NICU. So our first week with twins had a lot of experiences that I had never experienced, and it wasn't necessarily planning for or hoping for. I remember preparing for what could happen in the birth and the delivery, and the kind of 3 scenarios that I saw as possible: that we have 2 babies who are healthy and come home with us pretty quickly, that we have 2 babies that need more support and more time to develop and be ready to come home, and they spend some time in the NICU, or 1 baby in the NICU and 1 baby with us in our own care. And that 3rd scenario of them being in different places was the one that I was like, I'd take either of the other scenarios over this one. But that happened to be what happened for us. And, I think it was actually a blessing in disguise, because I was able to focus some of my energy on 1 baby at a time. And while I felt very divided and emotionally, that was hard to have all of our whole family not in one place at one time. It did give a little bit of an opportunity to establish feeding and get to know each baby on their own. And so I am really grateful for that opportunity we had. I guess that was just the starting journey of this reality that I'm not in control, and I also can't control my babies and what they need and what they're going to do. And that was something I think I did try to accept early on, but it just continues to get reiterated as the days and the months go on, of this need to just accept reality as it is, name the hard things that you're going through, and try to find solutions to those hard moments in a way that still meets the need but also meets your own needs at the same time. I want to start first with kind of our experience while we were staying in the hospital, what sleep looked like then, what sleep looked like when we transitioned home and we were doing bottle feeding, then what that looked like when I transitioned to doing more breastfeeding, what sleep looked like in terms of sleep training when we did that, signs that I saw that were indications that the babies were ready for something like that, and then just leave you with a few final tips. So I'm going to take a sip here before I get into it. So like I said, in the hospital, we had 2 babies in 2 separate places. I wasn't as worried about when they were sleeping or how much they were sleeping or how much they were waking up. I think I expected their newborn babies. Granted, they do sleep a lot, but I knew that they would be waking up to eat because they were hungry. So I expected that. However, what I thought was more challenging actually in those new days was establishing feeding. They were full term, but not to my due date. So because they were a little bit earlier, they were a little bit tired, more tired and sleepy, which would make those feedings a little bit more challenging. So some things I did to just really embrace those moments. I accepted a lot of help when it was offered. So help from the nurses, from family members. Through the night times when we were in the hospital, I allowed the nurses to take more of an active role in some of the feeding. So every 3 hours we would try to feed one of our sons, and I would attempt breastfeeding. I wanted to continue to expose it, but there was a big learning curve in the beginning with that. We just kept trying, and I would try for 10 minutes or so, and then we'd just say, okay, great, we tried, we did the best that we could, and now we're just going to give him some food. So we used donor breast milk, and at the hospital we were at, they used little eye droppers to kind of feed that with a finger in their mouth. And so we would supplement those feedings with some donor breast milk, and then we would try again every few hours. During the middle of the night, to kind of optimize my own recovery, we, took the nurses up on the offer to have our son go back to the nursery for a few hours so we could get some quality sleep, and then they would return him to us for sure every 3 hours, if not sooner, to do feedings. And we kind of just did that for those few days. I was recovering from a C-section, and so I was in the hospital a lot longer for my recovery than had I had a vaginal birth. You're going through so much. Just the recovery in and of itself is really hard work. Processing everything that had happened with the birth in and of itself is a full-time job and requires a lot of energy, and then to enter into all of the bonding with those babies and start building connections. I know that was a hard thing for me, having them in two separate places. Just remember that this is just a season, and what it looks like today is going to look different tomorrow, and it's always changing. Just accepting help when it's offered, but recognizing those needs. So that would be kind of my tip in those early days, is just be graceful with yourself and, just respond to each need as it comes, and keep pushing forward and not thinking too much ahead, because you can't even begin to predict what it's going to look like in a week or a month or 4 months, and to just stay present to what's currently going on. We then transitioned about 1 week after I was induced to going home, and I remember so vividly, it was like one of the worst snowstorms of the season in Minnesota, and of course that was the time that we were going to be traveling with our 2 precious little babies home, but we made it safe and sound. And when we came home, the babies gave us a huge gift. They just stayed asleep in their car seats for a good while, and the first thing that we did, kind of unpack all of our things, and we prepared our environment. And this is something that really is important to me, because having a prepared environment that is prepared to meet the needs is just a peaceful thing for me to have. And so some of the things that we did to prepare, we already had our twin bassinet set up in our room. It was just right here on the side of our bed. And it's swiveled. I'll link it in the description box below. We had that twin bassinet, and then I also brought up, well, I didn't, my husband brought up a mini fridge that we had in the garage, and we put that in our room just so that we could store breast milk and some snacks in there for those middle of the night feedings. And then we have a bathroom attached to our room, and so in there we set up a little bottle parts and pump parts dishwashing station, which was really helpful to have, because for the first few weeks I spent a lot of time upstairs, and so it was nice to not have to go downstairs to get things. We also set up a bottle warmer up here just so that we had the things that we need readily available to us. So I would recommend that, of just really thinking about how you want things to function in your space and preparing that so you can kind of more easily meet those needs as they come up. If you're going to experience, or you have experienced it, you'll be able to relate to just the wild experience it is to be entrusted with 2 babies. And it's such a blessing. I had to detach myself from how I thought things would go. I'm a planner. Like I said, a preparer, and I couldn't prepare for my birth, really. I mean, I could do certain things, prepare my mental state, but I didn't know what was going to happen. I just had to respond to the needs as they came. And the same was true throughout all of raising them so far, but especially in those beginning moments, because it really is unpredictable. It is not set. There's so many new things that everybody's learning, that you're learning, that the babies are learning. I remember talking with my husband prior to them being born of just, obviously there were going to be so many beautiful and good moments, and there are, but I also anticipated that there were going to be challenges. And I think oftentimes when we have challenges, we want to blame someone for it. I know that's my tendency, like that it's someone's fault, that it's hard. And the cool thing about parenting, especially like right from the beginning, is there's hard things, but it's not anyone's fault. Like the fact that breastfeeding is hard, or the fact that learning how to sleep and distinguish day and night is hard. That's just because it's a new skill, and that's because it's something you've maybe never done before, especially the baby. They've never learned how to eat before. This is their first time. Up until now, all of those needs of theirs have just been met without them having to communicate anything to us. And so it requires a lot of empathy for yourself, to be gentle with yourself and to give yourself a lot of grace to just acknowledge the hardships and accept that almost, and not feel like it's something you're doing wrong. It could just be hard because it's something new, and to be empathetic towards other people because it's an adjustment for everyone. And that mindset really did help me in those early moments, not to get too discouraged when things weren't going right. And so I would just encourage you on kind of shifting that mental thought towards empathy and towards an understanding mindset of what a wild and huge transition it is to start caring for two babies. Another thing that helped me was just not latching on to things that went really well or things that didn't, and allowing that to be a determination of how the next day would go, because that really wasn't my experience. I remember if we have a great night, going into the next night being like, oh, it's just going to be the same. It went really well. Like they slept a nice long stretch. And then that wouldn't happen again, and I'd be pretty disappointed and frustrated, thinking that it was maybe something I did wrong. And that's not the case. It's just really variable in the beginning. And so you can prepare yourself for that and not put blame on yourself for how something did or didn't go, because it's a lot of trial and error. And so I'm going to share a little bit of those experiences of what worked, what didn't work, how logistically we did it, because these are the kinds of questions that I had going into it. I remember, especially in those early days, I tried to find any other twin mom that I knew who I could ask these questions to, and just ask them what they did, or how did they try this thing, or what was their routine for this. And although I wasn't able to replicate their circumstances because it was very different, there were bits and pieces that I thought, oh, I could try that. I like that idea. And so let me share with you some of those stages. So the first stage was bottle feeding and pumping during the day and night with just some exposure to breastfeeding. It was really a desire of mine to breastfeed twins. I had this, really picture perfect idea in my head that I would be tandem breastfeeding my twin boys, and it would just be magical and lovely. And I had to let go of that desire of being so immediate, and I had to just meet the needs in front of me. And my reality was that they were small. They needed to get food. They needed to get it quickly. And I also needed to have time to be able to rest. And when I was attempting to just breastfeed them, what I found was they would nurse for 30 to 45 minutes, and then I would nurse the other one for 30 to 45 minutes, because in the beginning it was hard to feed them both at the same time. And then after I fed them, then I would pump, and then they'd wake up and they would still be hungry because they hadn't really gotten a full feeding because they just weren't that far along in their feeding journey. It was still hard for them. So then I would end up having to top them off with a bottle of the milk that I had just pumped, and then it felt like we had just started over, but I had just pumped. So it was just this kind of unrealistic and unsustainable process that I had to say, okay, maybe not right now. And so I just kept the option available. I kept trying. I would try at least once a day to latch each baby. We'd give it our best shot, and then I just had to trust that if I keep trying at it, but give them what they need, and we all can just slowly ease into this, then maybe it will still be possible down the road. And it was. That transition really did happen naturally. Point being, we started with bottles, and I did a lot of pumping. I pumped every 2 to 3 hours in the day, and then every 3 hours at night, or I got into a routine where I only pumped at night when the babies woke up so that I could get as much sleep as possible. I relied heavily on my husband's help at this time. So when a baby would wake up, we would both kind of get up, and I would get started getting all my pumping things all situated. I'd start warming up bottles. He would get the baby that had just woken up and would change their diaper if they needed it. And then I would be all ready to start pumping. He would hand me a baby, then he would go get the other baby, even if they were asleep, just so that we could kind of do all of this in one fell swoop. He would get that baby and change their diaper, and then he would feed them a bottle. So we would I'd pump and bottle feed one, and he would bottle feed one, and within 20 to 30 minutes we were all tucked back into bed. It got to be really efficient that we would do that 2-3 times a night. In talking with other twin moms, I started to realize that maybe breastfeeding at night would be a good option. I had slowly been making that transition to do more and more breastfeeding during the daytime. I got to a point where I was exclusively breastfeeding them, probably around a month old, maybe a little after. And so it was hard though, because I was like, but what if it doesn't go well? What if it's just really bad at night? So it took me a few days to really get on board with the idea of changing something in the night. And then we did, and we tried it, and I was surprised. It went really, really well. At first, when I started breastfeeding at night, what sleep looked like in our routine then was anytime a baby woke up, I would get up, I'd get situated in the chair, and my husband would, again, change the baby's diaper and then bring the baby to me in the chair, and then he'd be able to go back to bed. And I'd nurse them, lay them back down. Something I wish I did, and then typically after I laid him down, I would go back to bed. What I wish I would have done differently would be to then not wake the other baby, but offer a feeding, through a dream feeding, where you don't really wake them up, but they will still suck and nurse even in their sleep. And I didn't do that because I think I didn't want to interfere with the sleep that they were getting. If they were going to do a nice long stretch, I didn't want to affect that by waking them up. But then typically what happened was I'd go back to bed, and 30 minutes later, the other baby would wake up. So it seemed to chop up my sleep more than probably was necessary. So that's something I would do differently if I were to ever have twins again. But then as they continued to get bigger, what got really nice is they were able to sideline nurse, and I was able to do that in the bed. So we kind of transitioned from me getting up and sitting in the chair. Sometimes I still would, but I got to a point where I would just pick up the baby, bring them into bed with me, nurse them side lying, and then lay them back down when they were finished eating. It was really slick though too, because it was almost like they never were really awake very long. If I picked them up very promptly, I was really good at just quickly grabbing them because I didn't want them to wake up their brother, and then starting feeding them, and they'd feed and go back to sleep, and sometimes we'd both doze off. I know you have to consider if co-sleeping is something that you're comfortable with. For us, it was something that we were able to do safely, and I got sleep, quite frankly. And so I think that was a huge key to happy, healthy sleeping babies and a sleeping mom, was being able to do that. So again, logistically, because I like the logistics, or I did as an expectant mom, we had made a transition from their bassinet to using floor beds. That's a Montessori principle. I have a background in Montessori, and so we did floor beds, and we still use a floor bed. I will link a little video that I had made about our Montessori nursery tour with floor beds up here. So we transitioned to using floor beds in our room before we slept them in their room on a floor bed at night. And so once we would get them to sleep, then we'd place them on their floor beds, and I would, when a baby woke up, grab them from the floor bed, bring them into bed with me, nurse. And then typically what would happen is when the other baby woke up, I'd put one of them back onto their bed, grab the other one. Once we got to that stage, it was better when they woke up at different times and not at the same time, because it was so slick to just lay down, nurse one, and lay them back down. When I had to like sit up in bed and nurse them both at the same time, typically they didn't fall back asleep as well. So there were definitely times though when that happened, and I would sit up and nurse them both at the same time, and we'd have to work a little bit harder to get them back to sleep. So it was nice when they kind of tag teamed the wake ups. So that was night sleep with that. At a certain point, I think it was around like 5 or 6 months, we transitioned them to a floor bed in their bedroom. And so again, we had a twin size mattress and a crib size mattress. We would use like a baby monitor, and anytime one of them woke up, I would go in there and I would just be able to sideline nurse him in his twin mattress, and then once he was done eating, I'd slip away and I'd go back to bed. Another thing that I wish I did more of was then offer a dream feed to my other son right away, because if I didn't do that, I'd go back to bed, and sometimes within just an hour, I'd be back in there feeding the other one. So that would be something I would do differently. Was if I was already up, I wish I had just gotten both of them fed to kind of optimize the possibility of longer stretches of them both sleeping at the same time, because they weren't necessarily waking up like a crazy amount. If one of them was waking up 2 to 3 times, but then the other one was also waking up at 2 to 3 times at different times, then 6 wake ups during the night felt like a lot, and I could have made that easier on myself had I, just optimized those dream feeds during that time. Then we got to around 8 months, and we were able to start sleep training. I'm going to come back to the sleep training, and I'm just going to talk briefly first about like daytime sleep and naps, and logistically what our process for that was. So up until about 4 months, for sure, we offered support at all times to get them to sleep, whether that was nursing them to sleep, rocking them to sleep, baby wearing them, all of those things we did. And I really didn't have any concerns that offering all of that support would like undermine the possibility of them getting themselves to sleep later. We would try putting them down when they were drowsy but like still awake. Around 4 months was when there were more and more days that I was on my own. And so what it looked like practically was, logistically, it's hard to hold 2 babies and rock them when they're kind of moving, and it's just easier to get one asleep and then the other one. So what would happen is I would be in the nursery, and I had a chair, and there were 2 mattresses on the floor. And typically I would lay one on their mattress, kind of drowsy but asleep, and then I would work to rock the other one and get them very close and lay them down, but then the other one would still be awake, so then I'd grab that one and rock that one, and I kind of just like tag teamed getting them close and close and close to sleep. And then there were just times where if they were laying on their bed, they put themselves to sleep. And so it slowly transitioned into them being able to get themselves down for naps. Because of the Montessori floor bed philosophy, the environment is prepared to be completely safe for them to move around. And so at a certain point when they were more mobile and I knew they were capable of putting themselves to sleep, they had one another there. I would, do our little bit of nap time routine, get them into their sleep sacks. I found some cool sleep sacks that had like feet that they can put their legs in so that they could still crawl around and stuff. And they got used to just being able to move around and fall asleep when they were tired. And so I would say goodnight to them and close the door, and they'd be in there, and they would get off their bed a lot of the time. Sometimes they didn't, and they would just go right to bed. And that has worked really well for them. It was nice for me because they didn't depend so heavily on me to get to sleep, and they were also really content doing so. They had other things to do while they were working on falling asleep. So if you have questions about the floor bed, drop them in the comment section below. I don't think I've made a video on that specifically, but would if that's something you're interested in learning more about. So that's kind of what we did for nap time. So I would say around 4 months that transition happened of them starting to put themselves to bed more often than not. But I definitely still did nurse them to sleep at times. But once they developed that skill of being able to put themselves to bed, I found that I became somewhat of an obstacle to them at times, that I didn't, they didn't really know how to fall asleep with me there, like always patting them or comforting them. I definitely did that when it was necessary, but a lot of the times it wasn't necessary and they could do it on their own. So that was daytime naps. Then we did that for many months, right? From about 4 months till 8 months. And at around 8 months, I had a few signs that I was starting to feel like, I think maybe we're getting to a point where you just need to learn how to go back to sleep when you wake up at night. So here were some of my observations that led me to think this. One, they were waking up in the night still multiple times, but they would only nurse for like 2 or 3 minutes to get themselves back to sleep. And if nursing didn't get them back to sleep, my ability to like comfort them or rock them back to sleep didn't seem to be super successful either. And so they would then at that point still have to get themselves back to sleep. I just was feeling like those feedings weren't necessarily for like food and were more for just, I woke up, I need to go back to bed. Another thing was they were eating more solids. So I knew that they were getting more calories during the day and probably could come back on some of those nighttime feedings at that point. And so my goal for sleep training was to really create a new association with what happens when I wake up. Like if I wake up in the night, I go back to bed. Before that point, our system and our routine in the night was if they woke up in the night, I nursed them to fall back asleep. And that worked really well for a long time. But then there was a tipping point where I was like, okay, I don't think we need to keep doing it this way. So that's when we were ready to start sleep training. So I'll talk a little bit about like how we did the sleep training. I didn't take any like sleep training courses or anything like that. I talked to some of my sisters, a few friends, like what they did when they did it, and I talked to a friend who had taken the Taking Care of Babies course, and again, I didn't take that course, but my understanding of it is that it reflects a lot of the Ferber method, which is like timed check-ins. So when we were ready to start, I knew in my mind that I didn't want to just completely cut out nighttime feedings like cold turkey. I wanted to like have a gradual and gentle approach to this. But what I did want to do was I wanted to disassociate waking up with always nursing. What that course recommends is you as the parent initiating the feedings. And so I initiated feedings with both of my babies at 10 o'clock or like right around that time before I went to bed, and at 3 in the morning. For the first week, I kept both of those feedings. I slowly shortened that 10 o'clock feeding by like 1 or 2 minutes every night to the point where it was like I was barely doing it. So I just stopped and I dropped that feeding. And then I would still keep the 3 in the morning feeding. And then again, at a certain point, probably by the end of the second week, I had shortened that feeding even more. And then we just dropped it off completely. Look into it for your own sake if that's something you're interested in to better understand the process. But you would definitely keep that feeding as long as you want. I just found that it didn't seem like they were needing it. At that point, the wake-ups had pretty much completely stopped. and they weren't waking up other times in the night. So for the first couple of nights, though, they would wake up at other times, and I would give it a few minutes, and then I would go in there. If they had came off of their bed, because they can do that with a floor bed, I would put them back on their bed, and I would just check in very briefly. I would say something like, "It's time to go back to sleep. I love you." I might give them a little pat on the butt, and then I would walk out of the room. I would set a timer for like 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then I would look at the monitor, observe, see what was happening. If it looked like they were working towards getting them back to sleep, and they were really, close, where you can see like, you're very close, I think you can do it, I would wait a few more minutes. If it looked like they really needed more connection and a check-in, I would go in there and I would do the same thing. And then I waited a few more minutes. The next time it might be 7 minutes or 10 minutes. And you just slowly lengthen that increment of time that you go in and check. I think with sleep training twins in the same room, one of my biggest concerns was that they would wake one another up. And that was really why I didn't do it for a while, because I thought it would just make everything worse in the night. Surprisingly, they didn't wake one another up. Sometimes it did happen, but very rarely did they wake up one another up when they woke up and were a little sad. So that was our process. I just wanted to share my experience of what we did. It worked really well for us. Again, within 2 weeks, I would say, they were no longer waking up at night. Throughout the last few months, a challenge has been more early morning wake-ups, and so that's been something that we've had to navigate. A variety of reasons. Most of the time I feel like it can just be another sleep regression, or it had to do with like getting to bed late, or something like that. So it seems to be like evening back out, but there's always going to be something that's not perfect. There's always going to be seasons of things changing because they're growing and changing so much. So you just have to kind of ride out those things as they happen and look at your goals for sleep as a whole, what you're looking for, what's reasonable based on the development of your child and the age that they are. I do want to preface, though, when it comes to like sickness and illness, I pretty much all of our sleep training methods go out the window, and whatever they need, if they're not feeling well, if they need me to lay in there and help them back to sleep, like I will do that, or my husband will do that, because clearly they have needs that need to be met in those moments. And so there have been times where I would nurse them in the middle of the night, or I would comfort them or lay with them, and I would get them to sleep, and they wouldn't have to do that on their own. So that's our journey. If you have questions about that, again, drop them into the description box below. Not the description box, into the comments below. I'll put any like resources or things that I have found in the description box below. I also have a few different blog posts related to our sleep journey with twins and how to use a Montessori floor bed, so I'll also put those in the description box if you are curious about that and want to learn more. I want to leave you with 5 tips for success. So the first is that you can't control a situation, but you can guide it. And to lean into that ability to prepare your environment and to guide things towards the direction you want them to go. Again, you can't control it. You can't make them fall asleep. You can guide them towards sleep by doing things that help aid their sleep, but you won't be able to control when they fall asleep. And I think when I accepted that, it gets easier to not like lose your peace so quickly over, they're not sleeping, they're not doing this. Because you can't make them do that. As much as you want to, you won't be able to. So just kind of take a step back, relax, trust the process, and guide them, and be doing the things to not create more obstacles to their sleep, but to really prepare an environment that encourages sleep. For me, the floor bed has really helped with that, because it reminds me of this freedom that they have to get themselves to sleep. And obviously, yes, I can guide that in multiple ways. I could support that as much as I want to, but at the end of the day, I can't do it for them. My second tip is, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but my second tip is, don't stress about keeping them on the same schedule. I'm sure there's other schools of thoughts on this. For me, personally, it didn't make sense to try to keep them on the exact same schedule, especially when they were newborns. Now, I feel like around 4 months, I don't know, around that time, like it just naturally synced up. But before that, it's so kind of random that it was really hard because I could get them both to sleep at the same time, and then one would wake up after 30 minutes, but then one would take like an hour and a half nap or a 2-hour nap. And I just felt very wrong to wake up a baby who was still sleeping, because it seemed like it would just make more problems if I had an overtired baby. So I did not worry about that. I just kind of rolled with the punches, was really available whenever they woke up, whenever they needed to eat, needed me. And it actually made things a lot easier in the day, because especially if I was alone, because sometimes they would just like tag team. You know, one would wake up and the other one would go to bed, and then the next one would wake up and that one would go to bed. And you just kind of were one-on-one with one baby all day long. I think I preferred that to trying to work with 2 babies alone all day long. So again, if it's something you really want to get them onto a schedule, I guess I don't have many tips for that, because I didn't try very hard to keep them on the same schedule. Again, now that they're a bit older and things just naturally sync up, they do stay pretty much on the exact same schedule. In the beginning, I wasn't too worried about that. My third tip for success is to just work on and try to observe your child and what their needs are. You know, there's a lot of tips and everything that you can do to make things go better and how to get your baby to sleep, but you're gonna know best based on what your baby is showing you, what their signs are when they're showing you that they're tired, and that's really how you're gonna be able to guide them towards healthy sleep habits, by observing what's going on and doing your work to prepare them and support them in that journey. My fourth tip, and something that I really had to work hard at, was to keep your goal of what you want it to look like in mind, but then do what you need to in the moment to make it work. For example, breastfeeding, that was an example. And even like my goal would be that they would be able to get themselves to sleep on independently, but early on in those moments, that's not possible usually. And so I, offered as much support as necessary, but maybe not more than was necessary. And so just keeping those goals in mind, having them out there, but not losing peace over when they can't happen, and really just doing what's necessary in the moment to meet that need, and then kind of have that balance. That was definitely something that I was working on in the beginning. My fifth final tip for you, not just in terms of sleep, but probably any time you are raising any child, but especially with twins, is to accept help when it's offered, and to ask for help. I'm so grateful that this was something that I did early on, because I think it really helped the process and helped the journey for me to be able to peacefully meet those needs a lot of the time and not feel so overwhelmed by all of the needs. So family, friends, people from your work, or just like I had like random people help me that like I knew but I didn't like know super well. Friends of my mother-in-law, friends of my mom's, old students of mine that I had taught to just come and hold babies, my just like family members, mother-in-laws came to help, and just like anybody who, people love babies and maybe it's not your vibe to have people in your home helping you, but even if they can do some dishes or vacuum, those little things make such a difference, and you don't have to do it alone. There are people out there who would want to help you and would love the opportunity to snuggle a sweet baby or support a mother with a new baby. Get creative with how you could accept more help. Those are kind of my tips for success when it comes to sleep and twins. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and that we're able to gain something valuable from it. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you're interested in more motherhood, Montessori, homemaking inspired content. I make one new video each Friday. I also have a blog, themontessoritwinmama.com, where I'm sharing more about our journey with raising twins in a Montessori inspired home. If you're looking for more resources, head over to there. I'll put the link in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for stopping by our Montessori home. Bye.